Okay, we're good.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you might be. Welcome to the VCOS webinar series. We're excited to have you here today. I'm John Buckman. I'm the facilitator for the program today, and we have Pat Kinney with us here in a minute, be speaking. We're going to talk today about behavior modification necessary to reduce the impact of depression. Uh, we know that mental wellness, mental fitness is a significant challenge for firefighters and the general public today. And so we're going to cover a lot of things today. But first, what's been going on with the Volunteer and Combination Officer section? They're the sponsors of the webinars. The VCOS, I think, is fairly busy. They monitor some of the legislation in Washington, D.C. We're planning for Symposium in the Sun 2023 in Florida, or some of us call it Symposium in the Dark, since last year we had a power failure about the time we were introducing the keynote speaker, but we adapted. We have about 550 attendees at Symposium in the Sun, so if you haven't registered yet, you better get registered because registration usually closes about 3 weeks before the start of the conference. We're looking at VCOS is rewriting several of our ribbon reports. We have a couple new ribbon reports come out. One that's going to be released at Fire Rescue on canine and comfort dogs and support animals. One that's just been finished. I just had a chance to look at it the other day, and it's got a lot of good documentation. If you want to start that kind of program, we're going to give you some tools in the report to help you develop that kind of program. The other thing is that we have lots of different IAFC events coming up. The most important one is Fire Rescue International in Kansas City in about 3 weeks. So if you haven't registered for that, we encourage you to come. If you want to look at fire trucks on the floor, they'll be there in Kansas City. So we encourage you to do that. So as I said a minute ago, our presenter today is Pat Kinney. He has been intimately, personally, and professionally involved in the mental wellness issue for probably at least 10 years, if not longer. He has some personal experiences that he has shared with many of us in the fire service. He has his book out called Taking the Cape Off and how to not be Superman all the time. But today we're going to talk about we're going to admit that depression is a problem for many people. And how do you modify your behavior to not let depression take control of you? So with that, Pat Kinney, I'll turn the program over to you.
Well, thanks, Chief. It's an honor to be on here. Welcome, everybody who's part of the program today. Thank you for taking the time to make mental health a priority for you. I think one of the things that the IAFC has been preaching now for a number of years is that this is a real issue. Just as we've rallied behind EMS and specialty rescue and cancer, behavior modification is part of a process that when we're dealing with mental health. And when you hear behavior modification, sometimes it can be almost like a negative word, like, wait a minute, I have to modify how I eat. I have to modify how I exercise. I have to modify this. I have to modify, I'm kind of really kind of up to here with modifying things. And I think today's program, what we're trying to say to you is to realize what are your limitations and embrace those limitations by doing something about them. And many times they say as leaders in the fire service, we all get lumped into one category, which always kind of bothered me was this, you're all type A personalities. I'm not exactly sure beyond the definition of what a type A personality is, but I can say all of the leaders that I've met who've been successful feel like they can make a difference. They want to make a difference. They want their people to be safe. They want the people they protect to be inherently have a sense of belonging and feeling safe. And they want to make sure that they take care of the families of those firefighters, all which are really, really true. Unfortunately, some of what we do, how we operate, can work against us in terms of that whole feeling of we've got to be the ones that are always capable of succeeding. And so we've got a couple of visuals. You should have got them in the handouts that I'm just going to kind of run through briefly, give you some overview of how that is. But really what I challenge you to do as we go through this program is plug yourself in. I'm going to use an example that we all, unfortunately, ran into starting in March of 2020, and then are still working through at this point. Luckily in a lot better place than we were, but we all sat in that same time frame, basically in the same bubble, whether you were a volunteer, combination, or a career department. And it triggered a process in you, I think, in all of us. And back again, and remember, I'm talking about that continuum that I believe all of us as leaders have in common. And that is, how are we more appropriately? How am I going to handle this problem? When you leave it in the we format, you got a good chance of doing it healthily. When you leave it in the I format, it can really work against you. And most of us are used to operating in that silo where you're the chief officer, you're the fire chief, you're the leader. You need to find a way to fix the problem, and it isn't all that easy. So now I'm going to go to that slide, and I'm going to bring it up so that you get a chance to look at it. You should have a copy of this. You don't need to see my ugly mug. I want to go through it with you, and I want to give you just a little bit of a history of where this came from and how I think if you put this on your wall in your office, if you put it in a binder in your desk, if you put it next to your nightstand, wherever you have a way for it to remind you as kind of a where am I at graph, it could be a real help. So I was really struggling when I was putting the book together about how do you describe when you think that you're a pretty decent leader, feelings of inadequacy. Where does that really come from? Why are we those who have risen to the top? And you always hear it's very lonely at the top, and it is. Why do we feel that way? There's a biological drive from that somewhere, and I don't understand it. So I had the privilege to work with Dr. Cody Todd and began to explain that to her. I don't get why I can remember every single mistake I've made as a fire chief, which, having been a chief officer for over 25 years, I've met a lot of them. Why do I remember those? But you know what? The victories, the things that I should be very, very proud of, I don't come back to me as quickly. Some of them I don't remember. Many of them I know were the direct result of what other people did. But when it comes to failure, I don't include everybody in the pool. I'm in the lifeboat by myself. Well, how does that operate? And we had the discussion about this vicious cycle about being a perfectionist and how that can lead to depression. And after a number of explanations, and I'm sometimes got a pretty hard Irish head to get things through to me, she said, let's draw this out. And so in the book, this is in black and white. I actually changed it a couple of years ago in the presentations to green, yellow, and red boxes. And the color coding is on purpose. Green being like a stoplight. So green is go, yellow is caution, red is stop. And so when we make decisions, this is kind of a real basic tree to go through so that you don't put yourself in that position of feeling like, well, we all got our cape. Our job is to save the day, regardless of whether this crisis is minor or major, regardless of whether we have any familiarity with the crisis or we have no clue what this thing is. We follow the same model. So let's go back to March of 2020 when we all were faced with COVID. And if you sat in your department as a leader at that point, many of you as chief officers were also the emergency manager for your city, for your district, for your county. So you were wearing two pretty important hats. And we knew very early on that this was going to be a challenge that was far beyond anything that a single organization had the capabilities. And then we began to see very quickly it was something that on a worldwide level, we couldn't really handle. So that immediately, that feeling of, okay, we're faced with a crisis. Here goes the cape. And that's okay. And I want to be clear on this. So when you start to make decisions as a leader, being in the green zone and realizing you've got a crisis and you feel like you can fix it is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. So we're green. Now, if we start down the left side of your chart, decisions are made to reduce or rectify the crisis. Okay, so let's start thinking back to when we dealt with COVID. First of all, we're dealing with a 24/7 crisis. We're not dealing in operational periods. We're dealing with every single minute of every single day. We're up against this opponent. Can you reduce the opponent in the immediacy of what's going on? And the answer was no, because it seemed to multiply by the second. So I wasn't going to be able to make a decision to reduce the crisis. I sure the hell wasn't going to be able to make a decision to rectify it. So where do you go next? Where did we go next? If you're in, we're going to back up for a second. If you're in something that's very simple to rectify, I have a piece of apparatus that's out of service. I only have 2 engines. I'm down to 1. Oh, I've got a loaner that I use from another department. Again, you're in that green box. Decisions made to reduce or rectify the crisis. Can I do that? Yeah. I have an immediate answer to that crisis. So you make it successful and you're still in the green box. The problem is that leaders and people who want to fix things, we're never satisfied with that. So what do? We look for the next crisis, or as my wife always used to refer to it, why are you always looking for the next mountain to climb? Why don't you ever stop and smell the roses? Because that's not how we're wired, right? So you put yourself in that yellow zone of, whoa, a little caution. Maybe you should slow down. Do you really need to keep going, go? Because eventually you're going to meet a crisis that you can't fix. Well, we don't do that. We use that yellow as, okay, I did slow down. Now I'm going back to full tilt, because you feel successful as the leader, that bottom box. The cape did work. And in fact, it motivates you for the next challenges that come on. And none of that's a bad thing. That's how progressive chiefs operate. It's how progressive organizations continue to grow. It's how you handle crises, both professionally and personally, on a day-to-day basis. Now let's take COVID and go down the right side. So you're unable to make an impact on this crisis. And here's where it starts to go from the we to the I. I can't understand why. I mean, I've dealt with all sorts of EMS crises. We've dealt with, it's not the first time we've had something similar to a pandemic or had a pandemic. We've got a little bit of a playbook. We're much more progressive on EMS. I should have simple answers for this. And the people that normally you would look to, who had the resources to provide your information, they didn't know what was going on either. And they did the best they could to give you information that was timely, accurate, and dealt with you having a successful outcome for the health of your people and the people you protected. But then the next day it would change. And then the day after that, it would change. And sometimes it changed 3 or 4 times in a day. As the leader in the organization, you pride yourself on the fact that I want to be able to tell my people what the story is. I want to reduce their anxiety level. The pandemic, that wasn't working. In fact, your anxiety level was going through the roof for very good reasons. All those chemicals that were going on in your body, or your adrenaline, cortisol, things were pushing you to fight and fight and fight to find an answer. And we wanted the answer in an immediacy, and it wasn't working. And we then had to stand in front of our people and contradict ourselves. And we all know that firefighters, that they're okay with information, but they want it to be accurate. And what we were giving them was accurate based on that moment in time when you stood in front of them. The problem was, once you changed it 12 or 24 hours later, or 12 minutes later, it was like, okay, which is true? And does he or she really know what they're talking about? And we're sitting in our office going, I can't understand why the old model isn't working. This must definitely be because of a lack of effort on my part, not on anybody else's. I'm just not trying hard enough. Now, if you take yourself outside of the pandemic for a second and just think about a time that you were faced with some crisis in your, not only in your department, but in your family, and you went to make a decision that you thought was going to rectify it right away, and it didn't. And so you immediately looked in the mirror and went, this is your fault. If you would try just a little bit harder, we could make this happen. And that's something that's a generalization that happens when people are dealing with mental health and dealing with depression. You know, if you just try a little harder, you can get yourself out of that. You can talk yourself out of that. You can force yourself out of that. And that's not the case. It's not true. But we felt that way. So what did we decide to do when we weren't making any progress? We're going to try it again. But this time, we're going to push even a little harder. We're going to spend more time at work. We're going to spend 24/7 working on this. We're going to do Zoom calls at night. We're going to keep this going for as long as it takes because I am going to fix this. Well, what happens when it doesn't start to turn? Remember, we're still in the yellow. We're in the, hey, warning. Self-doubt and anxiety begins to fall. Why? You're not getting enough rest. So your body starts to shut down. Chemicals that you don't want to be worked off, or do want rather to be worked off through sleep and nutrition and everything, they don't have that. Instead, we're operating on a lot of coffee, no sleep, and failure, perceived failure. And there's a difference. Perceived failure is you look in the mirror and go, I screwed up. Failure is when everybody's tried anything they can as a successful measure and it's not working. We're in a failure mode. We got to shift to something different. That perceived failure is when self-doubt and anxiety really begin to get in there into your face. I don't know what to do with that. I'm not used to it. And if you've risen to the top of your organization, most of the decisions that you've made have worked. And all of a sudden you're like, well, okay, I know that I have this working. Why is it that I'm instead going to be in a position where I'm failing? And we're not sure. So where do we go from there then? And you slide down into the red box. Now we're into stop. But we usually don't. I have no success here. My people are afraid. Think about what the different dynamics that COVID brought in. You weren't only worried about protecting the people that you took an oath to provide for service in your community. Your firefighters were the key, your resources. You take an oath to protect them. Now, beyond that, and you weren't sure you could do either one of those, beyond that, what about their families? I'm sending firefighters out into dangerous situations with what I think is the right protocol, which what I think is the right protective equipment, but I don't really know for sure. And I'm not having a success because all of a sudden I'm getting information that they may be even more at risk. And in fact, at risk that they may take that home to their family. But instead of looking at this crisis as this is a marathon, this is not a sprint. We're comfortable in a sprint. See a problem, run to it, fix it, run back, start with a new problem. This is a long 26.2 mile race, maybe 100-mile race. But we look in the mirror and go, this is all my fault. I should have figured it out. And one of the things I think we did poorly during that sequence that also is proven that is a tremendous positive toward fighting off depression. We talk about peer support. We talk about talking to each other, communicating. Many of us sat in our office and instead of reaching across to each other in that first 4 to 6 weeks, it was, well, I'm doing this wrong. I don't know where to order from. I don't know what to order. I don't know who to call. Do I put this out as an SOP? Do I not? Do we shut down? Do we stop mutual aid? All those things fell on what we felt was our shoulders instead of all of our shoulders. And it became my fault. And once that occurs, you lose any awareness of self-care. And I call that self-care human pre-planning. You know, all of those, many of you who've been through this process of promotion know you go through an assessment center. Part of the assessment center is they actually put you through, without specifically, a model like this. They give you a crisis. You have to respond to it. How you respond to it is going to dictate how well you do. They want you to come out in the green space. You're not always going to be aware of what that conflict was. You might not have had any experience with it, but you're going to work this chart. But in real life, when you're dealing with a crisis like this, it's not as simple. An assessment center that says you've got a 3-person engine and you're in a station that's 4 blocks from the railroad tracks, and you get a call at 2 a.m. for a freight train that's got every hazardous materials thing on it you could think of that crashed. And by the way, it hit a school bus, and the school bus had 40 kids on it, but it's okay because they have 4 nuns on it that are supervising. Of course, did we tell you that they're blind? And you have 2.5 minutes to make a decision on what you should do. And somehow we do that. We respond and we make a decision. Why? Because we've practiced a worst case scenario. We had never practiced for anything like the size of what that pandemic was and the curveballs it was going to throw to us. So instead of realizing that you needed to step back, we needed to form a team. We needed to bring in experts who were going to help us. We were going to have to share our cape. We continued to push through as the cape choked us. So we didn't do any self-care. And now you start to question, and exactly where is my cape? I always lean on it and it's not working. Now, here's where you come to the crossroads that are really, really important. And I think what we were talking about today is one of the objectives about this seminar is, how do you interact with yourself and even other people, whether outside or inside your organization, to reduce the negative impact that circumstances, which certainly you didn't choose to get into COVID, that circumstances have an impact on you. Well, if you realize when you're in that red zone that I am no longer taking care of myself, I have pushed as hard as I can. This crisis is not something I can manage or fix. What do I need to do? You realize that you need some help. And again, the courage that it takes to raise your right hand and say that you're going to get into a service and you're going to dedicate your life to other people that may eventually take your life is the same courage you need to use when it's time to ask for help. So you raise that right hand and you go, whoa, I'm over here. I need help. Well, wait a minute. I'm the fire chief of this organization, and we're in the middle of the worst crisis that this world has been faced with. I can't take a time out. I need to stay in there. Well, you've already proven by you staying in there and working harder and pushing harder, this isn't working. So you can't keep repeating it, figuring that all of a sudden one day it's going to. Not in the green zone. The green zone tells you that finally you wake up and go, no, this isn't getting any better. And the only person who can help change that course is still me, but how I do it is different. I do it by saying I'm stepping back. I need some help. I need somebody to help walk me through this crisis. And you do that now by inviting other people in to be part of your team. You share your cape with them. You look at people in your organization who are incredibly intelligent, great thinkers. They may not know anything about COVID. They may not know anything about EMS, but they're just people who think on a large scale and people you trust. Many times as leaders, we operate the higher we go, and that's why it's lonely. Sometimes it's because we make it that way. We don't invite enough people in where we're able to sit down at a table over a cup of coffee and go, man, did I screw up? Or I had no idea this was this way. How do we handle that? You go through the professional counseling that lets you take care of yourself, and you hand that crisis over to somebody else. Oh, I can't do that. Why can't you do that? Are you afraid of what that's going to do? Are you afraid it's going to put you in a position where you're not trusted anymore, where you're not thought of this all-knowing being? Well, I got a clue for all of you out there who are in leadership positions. If you think everybody thinks that you always make the right decisions and you know all, you are kidding yourself. So you step back in order to try and build yourself back up. So you can climb back in the ring. You can continue the marathon. People who run the marathon, if they've stopped at 12 or 14 of those water stations and it takes them 2-3 hours longer than anybody else, they still finish the marathon. But they're smart enough to know that they need some help to walk them through that challenge, that physical crisis they're going to run into. Failure to do that puts themselves in a position where they're not going to be able to finish. So you get that help. And what do you do once you get that help? You rebound and you return to that leadership role. You work your way around what is that normal feeling of depression because you refueled yourself. You fought off those chemicals that are working inside your body that are real things that are physically going on, that are making you sad, making you exhausted, making you confused, because you got the rest and somebody gave you a path. It allows you to take the cape off for a little while. Now, you look at the right side that's all red. What happens if you don't realize that you need help? Or you realize you need help, but you don't do anything about it? Well, you will sink into a depression. And you feel that this is all your fault, not because the circumstances are beyond anybody's control, but you're just not good enough. If you were a little smarter, if you're a little bit more creative, if you had thought about this earlier, we'd be on the yellow, if not the green road now. But it's you. You're kind of the loser as part of this. And then the two feelings that can just wipe you out as a leader, they can wipe you out whether you're a leader of your family, whether you're a leader of your organization, wherever you are, is you start to feel shame and guilt. It's totally my fault and everybody's looking at me that way. I'm ashamed of who I am. And it's not just I'm ashamed to be the fire chief, but it's ashamed of who you are. So in my case, I'm ashamed to be Pat. I don't like this guy. You're not who you thought you were. And you know what? Everybody else is looking at you and they know you weren't what you thought you were. Totally inaccurate perception, but you feel it because you were that perfect person. I can always do this. That cape's always going to come through for me. And then you feel guilty about it. Do you know these men and women are going home and they're afraid they're taking this disease home to their coworkers? That's my fault because I haven't been sure that they've got the right equipment, enough equipment. I don't have enough information. Why am I even sitting in this chair? I don't belong here. I'm not worthy of it. And what happens if you keep pushing through that and you still now at this point don't recognize that shame and guilt is misplaced? You could lose your leadership position because you now won't be able to function. You won't be able to continue to go with that. And you could suffer serious health implications because now you will drive your body so where you're struggling cardiac wise, you're still struggling from on the emotional side. Everything in your body is depleted. And that I always called it like the red check light that goes on in your car is now it is blaring in your brain. And if you act like most of us do when the check engine light goes on in our car and go, I'll drive another 100 miles, it's probably just a bad sensor. It might be. Or it might be telling you that you are really now faced with the end of what your life is going to be as a leader, but more importantly, what your life is going to be as a human being. Now, COVID, obviously, I gave you a huge crisis to deal with. How many crises are you faced with on a regular basis? If you ever get a chance, take a week, just 7 days, and write down every time during the day that you are met with I'll start with a challenge. And not every challenge is a crisis, but just write them down. And at the end of a week, take a look. And I'm talking about everything from, hey, Dad, I got up, I'm running a little late, I need a ride to school, to, the engine backed into the back of the station, to one of your firefighters came in and his child is seriously ill. Take all the crises that you handle in a week and look at the quantity weekly. Then go back and look at how many of them are you able to rectify or reduce that crisis right away. So that first box up there on the left, how many of them can you do? How many of them are on the right side in the first yellow box are you unable to make an impact on the crisis? And when you're in that yellow box and when it's one of those issues, you got to look at it and go, okay, am I unable to make an impact on the crisis because I haven't done all my homework? I haven't given it the effort. Or am I unable to make an impact on the crisis because it's beyond my scope? I don't have the resources, or I'm not God. I can't do anything about that. So you give yourself permission to not drop into the red. Look at that on a regular basis. And then if this chart helps to just go back and go, all right, I'm going to run that, kid's late for school, got a crisis, put the cape on. Can I rectify it? Absolutely. I can give you a ride. Your mom can give you a ride. Your older brother can give you a ride. We're done. I look for the next crisis. I can move on to it and I'm still in the green. As opposed to that firefighter came in and their child is seriously ill and they found out about that overnight. Can you make an impact on that crisis? Yeah, you can by supporting them, but not by trying to fix it because it's something that you can't fix. So we are constantly bombarded by interactions that we have with other people and with the circumstances that we have no control over. And how we process those decisions is what either is going to lead you down that path to depression or is going to lead you to a path of where you can be successful and you can be ready to handle the next crisis that comes along. How that goes is 100% up to you. We like to blame it on other people. We like to blame it on, well, I don't get enough support. I don't get whatever's going on here. You have to do a real internal look at yourself, that human pre-plan for yourself, where you have to look at that worst case scenario, like that train against that bus and go, if I'm in this spot where I feel this shame and I feel this guilt and I feel like I'm not worthy, and you start to feel those thoughts about, this whole world would be better off without me. Fire department would be better. My family would be better. Whoa, that's when you have to have the courage to go, I need to get help. And so the tie between the two, when Dr. Todd finally got this Irish brain to connect to it was, what makes you successful can also ruin you. So that drive to want to have the best organization, to want to have the best equipment, to have the best safety SOPs for your people, can also lead you to feeling like you're the biggest incompetent loser that's out there. And looking in that mirror and really thinking that's what you see is going to lead down that depression path that could get you in the long run, in the worst case scenario, to a point where you don't want to live anymore. You don't want to be part of that process. Now I'm going to stop for a second, and I'm going to ask Chief Buckman to weigh in if he would. And so Chief Buckman, as you know, has been across all the different levels as a local fire chief, state training, on a national level, president of international chiefs. He's seen all sorts of chiefs across this level. So we're all unique personalities. But Chief, would you comment on if you think that particular chart and kind of the process I talked through, if that sounds applicable to all of our folks who are in this profession?
Yeah, thank you, Pat. What a great bunch of information. When I first saw this chart, I was elated because it has that word perfectionism, and I have seen so many, not just fire chiefs, but people who think they have to be perfect in everything that they do, which leads us into feelings of inadequacy, which leads us into depression. And so, Pat mentioned about celebrating successes, large and small. We don't do that. When was the last time you high fived or you clapped about some accomplishment that somebody made on your staff or that you made or that your spouse made? We need to start doing more celebrating successes and patting people on the back. Uh, your cape, we all have that cape. Pat has one physically that he puts on, and he shows you how that cape does not protect you from all the things that you need to be protected from. Pat uses the word reduce or rectify crises. Those are two huge words, but you can't fix everything. So accept that. I, Pat used the word fault. Fault is a bad word. It indicates guilt. It tells your body that it's being attacked. It mentally tells your body it's being attacked. And so you got to be real careful in taking on every problem and making it your problem. It's because you need endorphins to be emitted when your body is under attack. Endorphins help reduce stress. They act as messengers to your body, improve your mood, help relieve pain. But it's all up to you. If you don't tell your brain how to think, guess what? It's going to tell you how to act, and you may not like the way it tells you how to act. So understand that we need to talk to ourselves in a positive manner. I was driving back from Ohio to Evansville yesterday and talking to myself, which I do, when you're by yourself, talking into my phone. And I wrote this yesterday, just a note that I made as I'm driving down the street. And it relates to fire chiefs, although it's aimed at a firefighter. No single firefighter makes a heroic rescue of a civilian from a fire by themselves. They have a partner, they have a driver, they have an officer, they have someone who bought their gear, someone who let them on the fire department, someone who did their training, someone who allowed them, their parents brought them into this world. We don't do anything by ourselves. But yet, we as fire chiefs and leaders sometimes think it's all up to us. I'm the one. And then when you think you're not successful, you start talking to yourself in a negative manner. Stop. Stop talking to yourself in a negative manner. We are problem solvers. That's what we are as fire chiefs, type A personalities. My wife tells me regularly, she'll come up and she'll start to tell me something and she'll go, I don't expect you to solve this problem. I just wanted to tell you. Well, it's the same thing as being a fire chief. Don't take on all the problems so somebody comes and throws on your desk. It's not totally your responsibility alone to solve all the problems. You're not alone in being a fire chief. You're not alone in the responsibility of leading a department. You have to have partners, and you have to have people that support the mission, support the goals and objectives of the organization, and support the leadership. So, Pat, again, great information. I'll end up with this going back to the perfectionism. None of us are perfect. You know, when we were born, we found out we weren't perfect. You know, God said, "Yep, be born, you'll be here," but then there were challenges. And so, you know, when you look at how we've gotten to this place in our lives, it's like, again, we're not perfect. Accept that. Don't beat yourself up because you're not perfect. Pat?
That's great, Chief. Thank you. I think some of the lessons that I learned, and I went through when I went through this chart, I went through. Most of you know aware of the fact that we lost our son Sean, who died by suicide, and so I plugged in after Dr. Todd and I had this ready for kind of an overview for any type of leadership situation. I plugged in our crisis with Sean and his depression. And I found that I was never on the green side. I was always on the yellow and the red side. Um, I realized very early on that I couldn't make an impact on the crisis he was going through, and I couldn't understand why. And I was definitely sure it was a lack of effort on my part. I just needed to try a little harder as a dad. So remember, this chart can be used in your personal life, not just your professional life. And then as the years went on, all I did was try again, and I pushed even harder. And that self-doubt and anxiety began. And what was interesting was I didn't have the same self-doubt and anxiety in the firehouse. I had the self-doubt and the anxiety as a dad and as a husband. And when finally things were getting really bad, I blamed myself. This was all my fault. I didn't look objectively and go, this is a disease, a terminal disease that I can't fix. Instead, I lost all awareness of self-care. I was busy self-medicating. I was busy overworking. I was busy tightening my circle instead of widening my circle, that I could have gotten help by handing my cape off to other people, asking somebody else to carry it for me or fly with it or get it the hell away from me. I went inside, and it eventually began to eat me away. And I did sink into a depression. And I really felt when he passed, it was all my fault because I wasn't a good enough dad. I didn't do the things I should have done. And for a great period, I felt tremendous shame and guilt that I had let him down. And it really wasn't until then I was able to go over to that left side of that equation and realize that I needed help and got professional counseling to help walk my wife Eileen and I through that crisis, that I avoided that last box. I didn't lose my leadership position. I was able to rebound and return back to that role thanks to the help and support of all the people in my organization at that point in the Hinsdale Fire Department, who they wore my cape for me on so many different occasions. And I smile now when I look back and go, yeah, that crisis never even got to me, because they realized I was not in a position at that point to be able to fly the cape. So they did it for me. And I don't think that there's any more powerful thing in an organization you can do as a team is you got to be able to help each other. We're always talking about the brotherhood and sisterhood. And honestly, sometimes those terms drive me crazy because they become convenient shields to hide behind. But when people are truly in a real crisis, a real personal crisis, you also see the best of the fire service with people who respond because they understand that the person that they're dealing with, that they care about, is in the red boxes. They are in crisis mode and they don't even realize it. And you can go ahead and make that difference. So some of the things I learned when I plugged the COVID into this was you have to have a trusted group of peers that you can vent with about the system. The system back then, as we talked through this, was we didn't know what information was timely. We didn't know what was correct. We had problems with getting supplies, and we were dealing with the unknown, something none of us had dealt with. During that time, you got to take care of yourself, and you realize that you're pushing harder than ever at that point to try and make it good. So walking away, finding whatever works for you. I'm not talking about taking a 2-week vacation to Hawaii during COVID. I'm talking about maybe taking an hour lunchtime where you go for a walk and turn off every device that you've got and just allow yourself to refuel, because you have to. And you got to know then when to take the cape off. It's not working. I got to give it to somebody else, because it's not, I'm never going to fix this crisis. And in fact, I'm not doing anybody any good the way I am. You surround yourself with good people. And the ones I call good people, the ones who are going to tell you in all situations the truth without fear of retribution. They want to see you get back in this green zone. They want to see you do well, but they're going to come in, close the door, and go, do you realize that that last SOP that you sent out, you had like 10 or 12 misspellings in you? That's not you. You're exhausted. You're not even sure which end is up. You need to take a break. Instead of getting angry at them and feeling like they're saying, well, you're not doing your job, and there's your self-doubt and anxiety, you go, hey, thanks a lot for having my back. Yeah, I'm gonna get out of here for a little while. Well, I got this. I'll take it. Okay. You can take my cape, and I'm not going to be worried that I'll never get it back, because that's where you start to lose that self-confidence. Also, I saw during COVID, there were a lot of people who said they were leaders, but they really weren't. They were naysayers. So you never saw them stand out front. They were never in the green side of this. They were never putting their cape on. They were just waiting for people to fail. They were always good about pointing out how things didn't work well. And you have to be careful, because it's easy then for you to slip into that yellow box and feel like I'm not doing it well enough. And that anxiety begins, and realize they are who they are. They just want to take shots. So don't pay any in one ear, out the other, keep them away from you. Be okay with not having a blueprint. Sometimes a crisis doesn't have, you don't have an IAP. You don't have a human pre-plan. This is something you've never dealt with. So immediately recognizing that, which is going to keep you from going into this perfectionist and depression path, is important. I've never seen this before. I'm not qualified to make a change on this. How do I go about getting the resources or the people in order to be able to hand that cape off for somebody to be effective? And that's showing true leadership, that realizing that you can't do it, as opposed to that's look that you're somehow giving away your cape. The other slide that's part of what the presentation that you should have, go to the next one here. And this is part of the Yellow Ribbon Report. And you all should be aware of the Yellow Ribbon Report that's been revised, that talks about behavioral health, talks about mental wellness. Chief Buckman has been the champion of that for years, since we did the first one. And it's a phenomenal document. I will tell you, if you're a small volunteer fire department, or even if you're a highly progressive, huge department, when you first read it, you might get a little intimidated and say, well, we don't have the resources for this. We don't have the money for this. We don't know. I don't even know how I would bring this out to my people without fear of losing them. Because one of the things we're dealing with now with recruiting and retention is, well, we can't get people to come into this profession, because look at what even thinking about COVID did. And I think that that's not what's driving people away. I think that there's a whole change in society that the fire service needs to take a look at. How are we approaching people that we're recruiting, and what are we saying about ourselves? That's a whole nother seminar. But realizing that you don't need to do everything that's in that document overnight, but you need to look and go, what are we doing? Are we doing nothing? And honestly, and it'll be nobody who's on here, because you wouldn't be on here if you were one of these organizations. But unfortunately, I get a lot of information that gets sent to me, and there are a lot of places that are still got their head in the sand, and which sometimes I think is just as bad. They check the box. Well, yeah, we have a program. But what's your program? Well, it's a behavioral health program. Well, that's great. What are the components? Do you do peer support? Have you vetted who your psychologists are? What have you done? Well, I'll get back to you on that. And then it's crickets. You don't hear anything back. But by God, they got a behavioral health program. So one of the things we looked at in with the Yellow Ribbon Report was, how do we make this for the line firefighter easy for them to assimilate the information with something that they're kind of used to already using? So we took a tactical worksheet and said, let's make it an emotional tactical worksheet, something somebody could look at if somebody's struggling. Because one of the things we are not very good at is recognizing when our fellow firefighter is struggling. We're very good if they have signs and symptoms that we're used to. They got chest pains, shortness of breath, that pain down their left arm. We immediately think potential cardiac, this could be fatal, we'll do something about it. Well, that person who's not engaged, or looks like they're withdrawn, or all of a sudden is very angry all the time, that's not their norm. We don't know what to do with that, because what's that a sign and symptom of? And sometimes it can be a sign and symptom that can be just as dangerous as a cardiac. So we said, let's play with the worksheet, and it's not perfect, but it'll give people an idea. Maybe they can see. So I'll go through it very, very quickly with you. So our benchmarks on that emotional tactical worksheet. So the left column there under your green banner that says benchmarks. Evaluate the scope of the problem. That young man who comes into you and says, my 5-year-old daughter was just diagnosed with brain cancer. Whoa, we're looking at a huge problem, a huge crisis for that person in their family. So should we put together some kind of an action plan to help that family? Absolutely. So who are the handoff sources that we can contact? Who are the people that we can call and go, tell me about this cancer? I've never even heard about it. You call the local ER, your contact, whoever it is, and say, tell me about this. Where can this go? What are the treatments for this? What's the downside? What kind of time off do I need to provide for this person? Are they going to be dealing with it? Establish a safety officer, and that means the safety for the family as well as for the member. I evaluate you. Well, because many of us, and I was one of them, I pushed myself to continue to go to work when Sean was going through his crisis because I felt safe there. Well, I wasn't always functional there. It's good to have a safety officer to go, whoa, time out. You need to go home. Well, I don't have enough time. I don't have enough paid time off. I don't have enough time. I'm working another job. But, my permanent job is a volunteer. Somebody's got to be the safety officer. Somebody, obviously, that they trust. Verify the member has made contact with whoever they need to. So if they're doing peer support or if you have an employee assistance program, if they need help, are they making the contact with the people that they need to? And that could be the social worker at the hospital in this example. We have RIT teams for a reason. We know that there are going to be crises where somebody's going to go down and somebody has to follow up with them. Who's the backup team for that family? And I'm talking about simple things like the water heater goes out. Somebody's is going to play in a baseball tournament, and mom and dad are not going to be able to be there because they need to be with the daughter. So somebody needs to show up in the stands and clap for that kid when he gets a double. Who's that going to be? Make any appropriate notifications that you do. So in your organization, when somebody goes through something like this, it's obviously very private, but there are people who need to know throughout the chain. You let them know right away. Here's what that family's going through. So you may see somebody who's definitely more short-tempered. You may be somebody who's more withdrawn. You may be somebody who needs a hug, not a kick in the ass at this point. So don't go down that road because there's a really good reason for what's going on. And then once you have all of that in place and the system is now starting to work, and again, remember, you can't fix that crisis. That's going to be up to whether it can be medically done or not. But at least you have the situation under control. What are the risk factors that go through there? And this is what can drive somebody, whether it's the person directly involved or the family member, risk factors that we all have. Do you have a trauma or abuse history? Are you struggling to sleep? Substance abuse? Do you have access to firearms? Do you have a history of depression, low self-esteem? Any of those in that yellow risk factor box that you can look at and go, yeah, this is going to contribute to the fact that the emotional wellness of this person is not optimal. In fact, they're in trouble. For our options available, somebody has the discussion at the tailboard. The discussion around the kitchen table is really one of the most powerful discussions we can have. We always kid about, well, yeah, it's a time to pick on somebody, nail somebody. They kid them about something that occurred. That's also a time to really build that bond and go, we got your back. You don't have to get into the deep details of somebody's struggle with their family, but you can certainly say, hey, I heard, and whatever you need, and make sure that you keep doing that. Because most people, when they offer whatever you need, it's a one-time offer. And I can tell you, as somebody who's sat there struggling, I did not take most people up on it because it seemed to just be a gesture as opposed to a genuine concern. Genuine concern sometimes is reflected as how many times do you keep coming back to me going, is there anything? Because today I might not need anything, but tomorrow I might. Official peer support through your organization, huge if you were in this situation, and a chaplain who's been trained in the fire service culture. Also, people are great people that you can reach out to. And we continue on at a higher level that you may not have. You might have a critical incident team. You might have an EAP. You might have a professional behavioral health consultant, or being aware of treatment centers that are out there. If, God forbid something happens to this child, what are you going to do? And there's our zones. We've got our Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, and Delta. You're doing a 360 of the person. So emotional wellness isn't an option, but it's a mandatory part of firefighter health and safety. So when you do a 360 of that person, how are they doing? It is all part of our overall health. And when that RIT team, they're aware of that situation, you assign volunteers to help the family. There's briefing with your command staff if necessary to give them updates on, hey, this is getting a little better or this is getting a lot of worse. What are the tactics, the professional and personal things we should do to help people? And does everybody understand that? Because one of the worst things you can do is go leaning into a situation like that, well-meaning, but you have no idea what's going on. And is the person in Mayday situation? Maybe they haven't walked in and told anybody, but they fail. And because they fail to reach out, the problem they see isn't solvable. They don't get professional intervention. They feel like there's nowhere to turn. And all of a sudden you have a catastrophic failure, which in this case could be a suicide. So where are they? What's the unit they normally handle with? Who's somebody they could reach out for to a Mayday? You go to our radio frequency. If they're feeling numb and depressed and lost, that's their location. What's their unit? Is it the family? Is it a family issue, a fire department issue? The name, the person. Who are you as a person, not a firefighter? What's your assignment? And you have multiple, as you can see there. The resources, you got to get it to them. And you may need to deploy the RIT. And PAR may be for that involved department member, and you got to get it to them when they need it. So that's just kind of an overview of what this particular tactical worksheet. You can take that tactical worksheet, and seriously, what you can do with it is you can just say, I'm going to change everything in it. I'm going to change it to such a way that it's going to fit our organization. It's going to do the things that we need to do based on your scope. Again, whether you're volunteer, whether your career, whatever that is. And what the resources that you have available to you may be a lot more than what we put on here, or might be a lot less. The point of this is most fire departments have some kind of a tactical worksheet. I don't care if it's a yellow pad and that's what you use. Great. Then make this emotional tactical worksheet a yellow pad, but that has information that's specific to somebody who's struggling. And again, whether it's the person or whether it's their family, whether it's the fire department company that's struggling because they just had a horrible event that they're all trying to work through as a company. Because as you'll see, and and you've read about, people process grief at different stages and different rates. Some don't process it at all. Some literally can process it overnight and are telling you the truth when they tell you, really, I am fine. Others will tell you they're fine in the moment. And if you had a polygraph, it would say they're telling the truth. But 3 months later, they're not fine. Whatever that'd be, bring it to scale for something that you can use so that people who have a block, as soon as you start to talk about behavior modification, they're like, oh my God, another one of these psych job discussions. I don't need this. No. We're talking about, we're going to approach this like we're coming up on a fire that we've never seen before, a challenge we don't understand. A, we want to take care of the problem. B, we want people to be safe. And C, we want all our people to go home. That's exactly what this emotional tactical worksheet is aimed at. Who's in trouble? What's the scope of the problem? We're going to knock that problem out so that they go home to their families at 100%. And we keep that person as part of our department because they're the most valuable resource that we have. So Chief Buckman, I would ask some of your feedback in terms of, especially where the Yellow Ribbon report went, in how this matches as kind of just an overview for somebody who might not really have much knowledge about where we're going with mental wellness.
Well, thank you, Pat. We'll tell you that greetings from Guam. We have attendee from Guam, and we have one from Portugal on the webinar with us today. So welcome to those people, at least several of those firefighters. Pat talked about the Yellow Ribbon Report. We are currently in the second edition of the Yellow Ribbon Report no, I'm sorry, we're still in the first edition. That's the Lavender Report. We're in the second edition, but we are looking at, at the Yellow Ribbon Report and what are the components and how to share that information with locals and to make sure that Yellow Ribbon Report is not sitting on a shelf. We're so sad to see all the work that is done, whether it's by the IFC, VCOS, NVFC, IFF, who writes lots of reports and good stuff, but it sits on the shelf. If you want to make a difference in mental wellness of your firefighters, get a copy of the Yeldon report and use it to help you develop a program. That's so important. The program is what's important, not checking the box, as Pat said. It is about having a program, a proactive program that doesn't wait till a catastrophic event happens and then we decide to do something. And when you look at the deciding to do something, uh, Dr. Pat Lynch did a webinar for us about a month ago on mental fitness. And in that, she talked about to go to the website positiveintelligence.com, and she talked about saboteurs, people who sabotage our thinking, and it's the actions that they take. And it basically, the positiveintelligence.com programs talks about 9 different types of people that sabotage your way of thinking. Your mind is your best friend, but it also can become your worst enemy if you don't control the thoughts, because your mind will sabotage your potential for performance and happiness. All your negative emotions that you allow to come into your mind add stress and affects your mental and physical health. And that is the result of self-sabotage. We do it to ourselves. And when you look at, there's 9 different types of saboteurs out there, from the avoider. This is the kind of person who avoids any kind of conflict, doesn't want to get involved. The controller, who wants to control everybody's actions. That's a lot of fire chiefs out there want people to do exactly what I say when I do it. Well, if that's the case, then why don't you do it? We got the hyperachiever, who is only happy if they are they're in front of everybody else, overachieving. Not everybody is a constant overachiever, and when they are not able to be in the hyperachievement mode, they quickly become anxious and have dealing with anxiety. Rational people, hyper-rational, they rationally process information. Sometimes the information is emotional, so they're sometimes perceived as uncaring because they're getting to the facts and they're emotional. They don't seem to be feeling other people. They're not empathetic to other people. That doesn't impact you. That's the kind of person you're dealing with that doesn't have some empathy for your problems, your challenges. Then that's not somebody you want to deal with. Uh, Hypervigilant, they can never rest. And I probably think back years ago, that's probably me. I was, I couldn't rest. I couldn't, and I'm still sort of like that as well. I want to get things done. I want to have progress being made. But sometimes I got to say, you just can't do all the things as you used to do. Then there's the pleaser, the one who wants to make everybody happy. And they lose sight of their own needs, and become resentful when they can't influence and make everybody and can't please everybody. And then restless is the one that's rarely at peace or content with the current activities. They're restless. Then the stickler is the one that's is totally needing for rules and regulations to be followed to the letter. And in this day and age, as much as I hate to say this, different strokes for different folks, especially in the volunteer world. You can expect everybody to be trained and demand they be trained, but their activity level is going to be based upon their family activities, whether they're married, they've got kids, what their kids are doing. And if you expect everybody to be fit into the same mold, you're probably going to be seriously disappointed. And then the last one is the one that's a victim. It's always, woe is me. Oh my, I'm not getting enough attention. They want affection and they don't get it. So they're more about their internal feelings, and particularly the painful ones. They like being a martyr. And but Dr. Pat talked about these 9 different saboteurs. Again, I encourage you to go to the positiveintelligence.com website, look it up, study it, read up on it. May help you personally and may help you in dealing with other people as well. So with that, I'm going to go look, Pat, to see if we got any questions. We got 1 minute left for our 1 hour presentation, but I don't see anything under questions answered. Pat, I'll throw it back to you.
Well, first of all, it's pretty neat to know that we've got people from Guam and from Portugal. I'm actually going to Portugal in September for the first time in my life, so I'm looking forward to that. So thank you for being part of what we're doing today, and I'm glad that you think that some of the tools we provided are something that you can use. I would ask you to do us one favor, and that is we need disciples. We need people to go out there and continue to preach that your mental health is a part of your physical health, and it's important to be aware of it. Don't become aware of it once it's kind of overtaken you and you're down and you're out. Be aggressive about that. It's something that you deserve to be happy and be healthy, because you can't be a better leader in any other way, as a dad, as a husband, as a mom, unless you're at the best you can be. And if your mental health is a go, you're way ahead of the game. So thank you for being so open to being part of this. It was certainly my honor to be on here with Chief Buckman. It's always a pleasure to be with him as a friend and as a fellow fire chief.
Thank you, Pat. The feeling is mutual. With that, let me just check for any questions. No questions. One of our friends from Guam said, great tools, great webinar. Thank you very much. So thanks for giving us some of that feedback. We appreciate that. And with that, we're right at 3 o'clock. We're on time, 1 hour. Appreciate everybody coming on. We do have VCOS does have a webinar tomorrow. Now I can't think of the name of it, but if you look at the VCOS websites, you can find out the webinar that is tomorrow. We're trying to do them every 2 weeks, and sometimes we end up doing more because it seems like people attending. And we had great attendance for the first 6 months, as many as 130 on it, as little as 27. So, but we're very happy with the attendance, and hopefully it's helping you out. So with that, God bless each and every one of you. Thank you very much for coming. Have a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.